welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So whether you're a grizzled veteran, wondering why no one is paying the asking price on eBay for your 1997 Parker Fly, or else a scrappy upstart, desperately searching for the old-school marble composition books that don't have those ugly manila 3-section dividers in them, this is your show, because ultimately it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the last Friday of March 2017, and before we get to our regularly scheduled program, we have a very, very important farewell to bid. Born Charles Edward Anderson Berry in 1926, Chuck Berry grew up in a segregated middle-class neighborhood in St. Louis. Berry earned a degree in cosmetology and worked for a time as a beautician. He began playing in local bands in the 1950s, notably a trio led by piano player Johnny Johnson, and eventually, Muddy Waters arranged a meeting for him with Leonard Chess of Chess Records in Chicago. Chuck took an old standard song named Ida Red and rechristened it Maybelline. The song made Berry a star, reaching number 5 on the Billboard Pop chart and number 1 on the R&B charts. Alan Freed, the DJ widely credited for introducing the term rock and roll to mainstream radio, put the song in heavy rotation in exchange for a writing credit. That sort of quid pro quo is now just a spooky ghost story that songwriters tell their kids at night, but it was all too real then, and it became the nation's first payola scandal, and Freed eventually pleaded guilty to commercial bribery. Chuck would go on to pen what is basically the periodic table of rock and roll songs. All other songs that came after were just varied combinations of his basic elements. Roll Over Beethoven, Too Much Monkey Business, Rock and Roll Music, Sweet Little 16, No Particular Place to Go, and of course, Johnny Be Good. His lyrics captured the zeitgeist of a young, brash, post-war America, cutting class, driving fast, and turning the radio up. He coined guitar phrases that are just as recognizable in 2017 as they were in the 1950s. The call and response between his voice and his electric guitar is one of the purest, truest pleasures that a music listener can experience. When NASA sent the Voyager interstellar probe into deep space, it included a picture of the human DNA structure, a chart of mathematical definitions, Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, and Chuck Berry's Johnny Be Good. His later records never sold quite as well, but he continued to tour widely, and in later years, when Chuck was touring, he would often employ the opening band to serve as his band to save money. And in the late 70s, my own father played in one of those bands. He said that Chuck showed up after their set in a brand new Cadillac. He collected a suitcase of money from the promoter, looked over at the band and just said, "All right, boys, everything's in A." Did he have a checkered past with the law? Yes, he did. But I'd argue that many of those charges were so intricately connected to the history of race in America, to the legacy of being a flamboyant, successful black man in the pre-civil rights Midwest that we'd need another show entirely to give them a balanced look. So here, on our little show that focuses on songwriting, we're simply going to give him the artistic homage that he deserves. "I don't advocate sorrow," he once wrote. "I pursue happiness in all avenues of life, and so I shall avoid funerals, even my own." Goodbye, Chuck. Thanks for the tunes. So there you have it. He will be missed dearly, and now I'm provided with one of life's rare opportunities to switch directly from a eulogy to an out-and-out sales pitch. Thanks for being here this month. If you'd like to hear some of my songs live, here's where I'll be touring in the coming months. April 20th in Washington, D.C. at the Hamilton, the 21st in Brooklyn, New York at the Knitting Factory. Then I'll be swinging through Colorado for a short mini tour, the 27th in Fort Collins, the 28th in Lyons, the 29th in Colorado Springs, and the 30th in Denver, Colorado at the Bluebird Theater. All of those shows are with my friend Aeneas Mitchell. Then May 11th, I'll be here in Austin at Antone's on the 12th, in the Woodlands, Texas at the Dotsy Do, on the 13th in Jackson, Mississippi. May 20th in Columbia, South Carolina, May 25th in Boston at the Sinclair, the 26th in Earlville, New York at the Earlville Opera House. Then I'll be playing a festival in Sonoma, California on June 10th. And on July 22nd, I'll be in Raleigh, North Carolina, supporting Mandolin Orange at the North Carolina Art Museum. If you happen to live in San Francisco or Western Massachusetts or Australia, keep your eyes peeled. I will very likely be making some announcements about some shows in your area coming up very soon. So that's it. Come on out. I always love seeing everyone at the gigs when you come out, and I'm there after shows to say hey and to drink a beer. I always like to mention before we get the show started here that if you like this show, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, there are two quick, painless, very free things that you can do to help out. First, you could rate the show from within your podcast app. You just open up the app itself, click the search button, type in the Working Songwriter, click on the reviews for the show, and write one of your own. It's really easy, and in fact, you could probably just do it before the interview starts here today. So it really helps. When you do that, I hate to sound like a broken record. I hate to sound like an NPR pledge drive, but it's the point in my life that I've reached, you guys, so here we are. The second thing that you can do is simply just tell a like-minded friend about the show. And you could do that digitally by sending them a link to it on your phone, or you could just go old school and tell someone, mention the show, tell them to get on it. In the last few months that I've been asking you to do this, I've seen a real increase in the listenership, and that I just can't tell you how much that helps me out, and I really, really appreciate it. So thanks to all those who've taken the time to help out in those ways so far, and thank you to those of you who will do so in the future. If there's anyone that you want to hear on this show, if you have any suggestions, critiques, compliments, please drop a line to theworkingsongwriter@gmail.com. That's it. I do believe that's all the harassment I have for you this month. I had a blast recording this episode with Noah, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed having the conversation with him. My guest this month is Noah Gundersen. Born in 1989 in Olympia, Washington, he grew up in the smaller, more rural town of Centralia, Washington. He hails from a deeply religious family and was homeschooled along with his siblings. At 18, he struck out to Seattle and formed a band called The Courage. They became a local phenomena in the Seattle area and recorded a cult favorite album, Live at the Triple Door, in 2008. The Courage would eventually transition into the backing band for his solo efforts, performing under his own name. His debut album, Ledges, put him on the national map in 2014 as an important young voice in songwriting. He then followed it up with 2015's critically acclaimed Carry the Ghost. His songs have appeared on the scores of shows on Fox, FX, and the CW. An original song he wrote for the show Sons of Anarchy earned an Emmy nomination in 2014. He's recorded for Dual Tone and Dynalone Records. He tours nationally and internationally often. American Songwriter has extolled his vivid songwriting and impassioned live shows. Pop Matters has called him fearless and arresting, and KEXP, the venerable Seattle radio station, has written that his songs ooze a sense of pure, unadulterated emotion and vulnerability. We recorded this interview a few months ago when I was playing Seattle. He gave me the address of where to meet him, and I arrived at a shuttered boat marina on the Puget Sound. I walked past the moored boats, chained-up trailers, and vending machines with live bait in them, and then up a set of stairs. As if we had pulled a candelabra and a bookcase swiveled open to reveal the Bat Cave, we passed through a door into a fully functional, wired-up recording studio where Noah works and keeps an office. He was nice enough to sit down with me for an hour or so to talk about his journey, and for that, as you'll hear, we're all very fortunate. Describe being 19 years old or 20 years old, however old you were, and coming to Seattle, not go to school, not, pick a career path that was logical and seeming like it would lead to something steady, but coming to Seattle, not really knowing anyone, I guess, and striking out. Describe that time to me.
I guess it kind of just came from this, maybe it was the byproduct, a positive byproduct of growing up in a faith-based environment. Because I just believed it was going to work. And I had kind of put all of my eggs in one basket. I mean, at the time, at the beginning of it, when I was 16, I was like, if I can work at a coffee shop and make my music, that's enough. Which was, now thinking back to that, I'm like, damn, I had a lot of acceptance of that lifestyle, which I don't know how stoked I'd be about now. But I moved up to Seattle because there was no way it was going to work in Centralia. And I had a couple friends up here. I couch surfed with people for a while, and had a girlfriend I stayed with, and some other musician friends around. I worked at I had to get some kind of job to afford rent, and I would do anything kind of, and I put a post out on Facebook, and this guy who was a fan was like, I can get you a job at this tanning salon. So I worked at it. I took that job for a few months. I was terrible. I was not good at that. There was this one day when this person walked in. We were working off this commission thing, right? And this lady walks in, and she's like, I just want to do this tan thing and blah, blah, blah. And, I didn't really try to sell her on any of the packages because that really wasn't my MO. And she's like, sorry, I'm not, helping out your commission, which, I should have taken that as some kind of signal that she had some kind of insider information on the biz, but instead she's like, oh, I don't care. I don't really even want to be here anyways.
Right.
She's like, oh, what would you rather be doing? I was like, oh, I just, I love making music. That's what I want to do. And then I check her in, and I look at her file thing, and she's in corporate for the company that I'm working
the owner,
for.
Right.
And I get a call the next day from the boss who wasn't too stoked. But I I was very one track minded. Like this is all I ever wanted to do. I had someone tell me that if I had a backup, like people who have backup plans do their backup plans, and, which I've found to be true. It's a weird job. You got to have you have to have a certain a sense of mysticism and a sense of a kind of an obscene optimism that it's going to work. And you got to feel like you're good enough, and you got to also feel that you're not good enough, because that's what keeps driving you to get better.
Yes. And you should be receiving some feedback from the outside world that is corroborating that thought. You know what I mean?
Right. If you're yeah. And that's the tough thing.
To a certain degree.
To a certain degree, yeah. And thankfully I had, and also having people that'll tell you if you're like full of shit. Because there's a lot of times as an artist where you need someone to say like, this is working and this isn't, or this is what you're good at and this is what maybe you could be better at, or you're just not good at all.
Yes.
So thankfully I had some people in my life like that.
It's tough to trust people like that, and it's tough to keep those people in your lives. I know many people who are very talented artists who have done their best to chase all those people out of their lives. And their art and their thing has suffered for it. Really has.
Yeah, man. Honestly, I feel like I just got lucky. Like I worked really hard. I hustled, and I came about. I started doing this like when the only social media we had was MySpace.
Oh yeah, who's in your top 8?
I don't even remember. I tried logging in there the other day, and it's like a desolate, burned out wasteland of the internet.
Oh,
but that was a really awesome resource for musicians at the time. That even now, nothing really exists like that, where you had a pretty concentrated space where you could get in touch with all these venues, you could get in touch with other bands directly, and people would respond because it was new and they weren't being inundated with or overwhelmed with messages. And you could really make shit happen. Like we booked whole tours off of MySpace. And you don't really have that with Facebook or Twitter. So if someone was to ask me now, like, how do you get started making music, and people do ask me that, I'm like, I don't fucking know. Like, I guess but at the core, it's still the same thing. Like, having this sense of optimism that you can do it, a really good work ethic, and patience too, man, patience. Yeah. Knowing that it's not going to happen overnight, or not having an expectation for it to happen overnight. If it does, like, awesome. But then you're going to have a whole set of other problems.
Yeah, there is a whole set of other problems that go along with that. And to your point about patience, it's so important, and this is a larger point in life, I think, but just really trying to spend zero mental energy on thinking about shit that other people have that you don't have.
Oh, man.
And it's a hard thing to do, but if you can get to that place, I've found in my life, I'm always happiest when I'm there. Not where this band is, where that band is, who started before me, after me, this, that, the other, the whole fucking...
But we all go, man, we all do that. Yeah. I think, it sounds like you've gotten to kind of a better place with that.
Right now while I'm talking to you, and I've had a good day and drank a cup of coffee, but talk to me after I'm like 6 beers deep by myself, on the couch while everyone else is asleep, and I feel different.
Sure, or you're out for 2 months and you like maybe break even.
Oh
yeah,
well, yeah.
I've had those days too, but it's a lot. I think it's a lot better than it used to be, because that like the jealousy cycle is a tough thing to break. Because there's like, in a weird way, there is something in it that's motivating, because you're like, there is a weird competitiveness to the music industry that, that I think can have a healthy side. Like, there's some folks around here that have made really, really fucking great records in the last, year or so. And for me, that's been like, oh man, I got to top that. And that's like, that was the whole like Beatles and Beach Boys thing.
Right.
It was a competitiveness, but it wasn't it was more on what they were making, not on what they were doing. And I think that's the difference.
It's a crucial distinction.
Because success or status are things that come and go, and people have highs and lows. And we all want to make money touring and be famous rock stars and stuff. But the competitiveness with the making, I think, is the thing that can help to drive better art. And that's like, it's like inspiration. It's like inspiration molded with competitiveness.
Yes, and I think even to your point there about, we all want to be rock stars, and I think that's definitely why everyone got into it. But the older I get, I think to myself, maybe there's a place in between not being able to do this for a living anymore and being a rock star. Maybe there's a place in between where you make a great living.
Totally.
There's not all the weirdness of fame involved in it, and you travel around the country and other countries playing to a dedicated group of fans that are super into it and want to have a conversation with you over the course of a lifetime in an artistic career. I
think that's happening more and more, and I think that's a really good thing.
Yes. There's a lot more, and not that I'm saying that they're on the same ability level as him, but there's a lot more Tom Waits type artists. Tom Waits, in a weird way, is kind of a niche artist. Mm-hmm. He's the biggest niche artist in the world.
Yeah,
but
he's also very, very successful.
Yeah. I mean, but he's a niche artist when you think about the people who were really successful in his day were like the Eagles. You know what I mean? So proportionately, he kind of is, and that there's tending to be a lot more people able to exist there. It seems like.
Yeah, and I don't think Tom Waits necessarily falls in this category, but like the blue collar musician who's able to make, $60 to $100K a year. Mm-hmm. Working hard, touring, finding, having to be diverse in the way that we tour. Like you do a band tour, you don't make any money. You tour by yourself, you make some money.
Yeah,
you do both, and there's that whole 1,000 fans metric.
Right.
I'm sure you've heard that, where you have 1,000 fans who are paying, $100 a year to you. You can make a great living.
Yeah, you can. In my experience, my kind of cocktail napkin math on that is it needs to be more like 5,000 to 10,000 fans to really.
Well, if they're spending because say if you have 1,000 fans that are spending $100 a year on you, you're making $100K a year.
Yeah.
Which for I guess for me, a single guy, that's a great living.
Yes. Of course.
If you have 1,000 fans that are paying $50 a year.
Yeah.
Also versus expenses and all that stuff you got to take into account. But all that being said, there's a space now for blue collar musicians, and there's a world that didn't used to exist. Kind of just started existing when I started making around the same time I started doing music. I feel or maybe a little bit before that. I mean, I started touring over 10 years ago now. So but folks like Dave Bazan and Damien Gerardo, folks here in Seattle that, are not rock stars by any means. In my mind, they're fucking gods of songwriting.
Oh,
but, they make a living doing their thing, and it's hard and they work hard, but, at least it's possible if you're smart about it. And I think that's an important thing for, people coming up to realize that, you might not end up being a rock star, but if you work hard and you're smart and you continue to grow and you develop a fan-based audience that's it's dedicated and that gets something special from what you do, then you can make a decent living.
You can, and there's a form of payment that is not money. To me, the biggest form of payment outside of money is not hanging shingles for somebody else, but hanging my own shingles, working for myself.
Yeah.
Man, I've been on the other side of it. I've worked other jobs for other people, and I love working for myself.
Totally.
And the thought of ever having to do anything else drives me nuts.
Yeah, I feel you.
But, well, that kind of leads me to a question. So, there's a lot of people, kind of like a popular image of artists is that they're flighty, they kind of are very emotional, erratic.
Yeah.
But I've found, in my experience, and maybe it's different if you get really big, really young, and you've had an assistant taking your dry cleaning off the tour bus for, 10 years. But in my experience, artists tend to be some of the most practical people I know. And hearing you talk about in other interviews, not going to college because you were worried about the debt that it would put you in, or, working a job at a tanning salon just to pay rent, or living out of your car for a while to keep the overhead low, seems very practical to me.
Yeah.
So could you just kind of speak a little bit to how being practical in day-to-day life has been able to serve your artistic pursuit?
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of comes back to that idea of like, is this the most important thing in your life? And if it is, you just do whatever it takes to make it happen. Which is, that's the bottom line. And that can be tough sometimes on relationships, on your sanity, your health. But I think it all has to come from that. Like, do you want this thing the most? Are you like, what are you willing to do? Because you're gonna have to like sling some shit and like not sling shit like at people, but I mean like you're gonna have to work in the barn for a while. Yeah. You're gonna have to play in cafeterias to make a few $100, and you're gonna have to do gigs you don't want to do, and you're gonna find your line where you feel like you become a prostitute, and then you're gonna step back from that line. Being practical. I mean, I do despise that romanticized image of an artist that is almost like encouraged to be irresponsible and flighty, like that cliche, like or of the artistic drunk, or the like. Man, I haven't been drinking the last couple weeks, and it's like totally changed my perspective on my lifestyle, because I'm like way more creative, way more productive. I get a lot more shit done. Way more present, all this stuff. And like, I don't have anything against drinking. Like, I think it's great. And I would love to find some kind of balance with it in my life. But,
it's there to be found.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I'm working on that. And I think, especially like with alcohol, for example, as an artist, you think, well, I mean, so much of it is part of the lifestyle. You start touring and you just drink every night, and that becomes your normal. I drink every night since I was like, started touring when I was like 18, and so that's my normal. But it started to take its toll a little bit. And you tell yourself, well, I'm not drinking a fifth every day, so I'm not an alcoholic,
right?
And all this stuff, and I don't think I'm really like a classic alcoholic, but there's a lifestyle and a habitual thing that just you start taking for granted, and then you start telling yourself these lies that like, well, all these other great people were drinking and making their greatest stuff. And
Ulysses S. Grant was drunk the whole time and they won the Civil War.
Totally. Or like Hemingway, or like any of these folks where you're just, or Bukowski. Fucking Bukowski is the worst.
Yeah.
And I love him, but that also ties into that like comparing yourself thing in a different way. Like you got to know what works for you. And some people are able to do that, and God bless them. And also, like, God bless their liver, because they're going to need it. But for me, like, entering into this kind of new season where I'm, like, trying to cut back on everything, and then just realizing, like, you don't know how shitty you feel until you stop doing the thing that's making you feel shitty. And then you step back, and you're like, damn, this is maybe a better way of existing. Yeah, so I think all those artist cliches are such bullshit, and can be really damaging for young kids too. Like, I know for me coming up thinking that like this is the way, Bukowski was this way, so this is how I'm going to be, or Tom Waits was this way, so I'm going to be this way, or Dylan was this way, so I'm going to be this way, and and maybe that's a process that everybody has to go through on their own and figure it out for themselves. But it would be such a an avoidable hurdle if you could just get all those preconceptions out of the way.
Yeah. And then with the substance stuff, I mean, we've been talking about it through the lens of being an artist and how it fits there, but also you're a human being too, and artists aren't the only people that use substances because life is hard.
Totally.
You know? So there's a whole nother wrinkle there too. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a whole, when you're on the road and a beer, instead of reaching for an Advil, you reach for a beer with 7% alcohol in it. Mm-hmm. Or to get up for the show, you drink a beer and it come down from the show, drink a beer and a shot.
Yeah.
I mean,
enjoy the show, you drink throughout the show to make yourself loose. Like all this stuff. And then, or just you just spent 7 hours in a van. All you want to do is just drink a fucking beer.
Yeah. You're like, look, we're here for sound check. Carving out 45 minutes for a jog somewhere is not going to happen.
Right.
So,
and then you're going to sit around for 4 hours in a shitty green room that you don't want to be in.
Where the only thing that they've provided you with is an ice cold case of Sierra Nevada. Yeah.
God bless it. It's so great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not, man, I quit cigarettes a couple years ago, and I'm still using that as my excuse for not
for drinking.
Drinking it. Like, totally. With my wife, like I'm still, and I remember, maybe I'll have to edit this out of the podcast. I'll ask him if I can keep it. But Chris from Field Report, right?
Chris and I were just talking like 2 days ago about drinking.
Okay, yeah. Well, fair enough. Yeah. So I was talking to him because he just had a kid. And so, and our kids were born pretty close to one another. And so him and I were talking over the summer, and he was like, yeah, my lady's making me quit smoking. And I was like, Chris, can't you play that I quit drinking card? Like, he's like, I've been playing that for too long, man. I'm like, dude, there's still plenty of time to play that card.
It's tough, man. Yeah, the vices. Every human being is just like, everything is motivated by a fucking fear of death. That's why we have all these vices that are ironically killing us.
Yeah. And you can forget about it in a moment. And I think in a strange way, of course this isn't true, but alcohol makes you feel like you're in the moment.
Totally. It makes you feel in control while also feeling completely not in control. Yeah. Which for me, as a person that like is a bit of a control freak, is always got stuff going on in my head, and it's a great way to just not have to deal with shit.
It is. I think I have a part of that personality. Like, for example, like when I tour, there's this little tray that clips onto my microphone stand where I keep harmonicas and stuff like that. And I've become so fucking weird and controlling as I get older that I now carry like a spare one of those. Tray. I have a spare tray on the road. And I just remember ordering it at night from Amazon, just being like, as I'm typing in the order for the spare tray, just being like, you're fucking insane.
Yeah, you gotta have your spare tray. Yeah, but I mean, we all have our weird idiosyncrasies and like our things.
We do.
Yeah.
And the point is, alcohol can sometimes like mellow that. You're like, fuck a spare tray, man. I don't need a spare. Well, pick up the harmonica off the amp, man. Be all right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird thing. I guess I just hope that like if I was to give advice to people like, or anybody like thinking about being an artist, like don't buy into the cliches, man.
In politics, it's an article of faith that the spoils go to the candidate who can master the medium of the day. FDR was the first politician to understand the intimacy of radio, and he brought listeners in close with his fireside chats. He was elected to 4 terms. John F. Kennedy was the first to exploit the power of the image on television. During his 1960 debate with Richard Nixon, he appeared tanned, coiffed, and relaxed. Nixon, on the other hand, refused to even wear makeup for the cameras and came across as a sweaty, 5 o'clock shadowed mess. Kennedy took office. And the current occupant of the White House truly understands that the power of social media lays not within the quality of its content, but within its ability to dispute the existence of quality as a trait at all. And I think we all know how that ended up. The 20th century theorist Marshall McLuhan summed it up with his iconic thesis, "The medium is the message." Politics and so many other modern endeavors have always taken that to heart, so it's always been strange to me that when it comes to music, the medium is always treated like some incidental, entirely transparent vessel, unfit for examination. Yet, think of how our relationship to music changed once it could be recorded and separated from the musician actually playing it. Think of how it changed when a single performance could be broadcast to 1 million living rooms. Think of how it changed when a radio could fit inside a car and be played at 60 miles per hour. And most recently, how it changed now that music is as ubiquitous as running water. I've always had an idea of how to communicate with a recorded album or a live show, but have often struggled to grasp mediums just emerging. And as you'll hear us commiserating, I'm not the only one that feels that way, thankfully. Like to this day, and I really should understand social media because I was young enough when it came around to understand it, but I fundamentally don't understand it. That being said, I do understand and appreciate that is how people just communicate now, and that's it.
When you say you fundamentally don't understand it, do you mean like it's like how it works, or I guess what do you mean?
I don't understand. It's like I'm a person. It's like I'm speaking another language, so I know what the language is.
Yeah.
But you know how when you're talking to someone that English is their second language, they get zero nuance whatsoever.
I see.
And it won't let the conversation get past where's the library. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's how I feel about social media. I've always felt comfortable communicating with people via music. Mm-hmm. And actually, one of the reasons that I started this podcast is I was like, well, I think I understand how to communicate with people with that too. So I'll do what I can, but I don't know how to do the cool Instagram pic. You know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting to think of it as a language. Like I don't often think of it like that, because you're right. It's a new form of communication. It has its own like subtleties and yeah.
Think about it, and this hasn't happened yet for music, but especially for comedians, like it's become a whole new art form, as stupid as they are a lot of the time, but the ability to put one of these memes together, like a lot of them are really fucking funny, and that's a whole new art, man. Like,
sure.
It's a whole new thing.
Well, and I've also, lately I feel like we've seen some of the backlash of people trying to make jokes on Twitter, for example, that would potentially work in the context of a live audience, right, where someone can, see a facial expression or a body language that connotates like, this is a joke.
Yes.
Everyone, this is supposed to be funny. And then, but, in the written word, all you have is the only mode of inflection you have is your grammar and your punctuation.
Well, but you saying that the only mode of inflection that you have is grammar and punctuation, that's exactly what I'm kind of talking about, in the sense that if that's all you're working with, then you are going to miss the nuance of that medium. And so do I think does it drive me fucking nuts when I see something like emojis and shit like that? And do I become like the old man yelling at the cloud because I'm like, this is fucking stupid? I've become like that, but I've kind of come to realize, like, no, people are learning how to get this text across with a level of nuance that didn't used to be possible with them, that I wish I understood.
Yeah.
But I probably won't.
Yeah, I think there's a balance to all that. I think for me, it's been finding, like, prioritizing my sanity over my social media presence. Because I feel like I can, as an artist, you're continually told that your social media presence is hugely important, which it is to a certain degree, I think. But I guess every person has to decide like what they're able to commit to with that in different seasons. Because I mean, I find myself it becoming a compulsive distraction and separating me from my everyday existence, and that ends up bumming me out. And I mean, I think I have a bit of a compulsive personality, but there is there's like pleasure centers in your brain, like it's chemically releasing certain things to interact with a thing where you're getting constant gratification of people acknowledging your existence.
Yes.
And so I think being aware of that it's like, and doesn't make it a bad thing. Like, there are plenty of other things that also do that that aren't in and of themselves bad things. But I think it's important as we go into this new era, especially as artists, to be aware of the fact that these things affect us. And, it's the same way that some people can smoke an occasional cigarette and other people are chain smokers, people, or some people can have the occasional beer and other people can't.
Right.
And everyone's different. So I think for me, it's been like finding that line of like, well, what am I willing to do? Acknowledging that this thing is important as a part of my business.
Yes.
And enjoying the occasional interactions with fans. But also, I mean, Twitter has become a dark place, man. It's weird, like especially with the election and with everything that's happened over the past few months. It's there's valuable news, but then there's also just an overwhelming torrent of just like oppressively dark shit. And I'm like, is this really? Yeah. Is me being on here positively affecting my life or the life of those around me?
Dude, I feel the same way about that platform, and especially post-election. I mean, I got a lot of thoughts, political thoughts. A lot of my music is pretty overtly political, but I just haven't said shit on Twitter because what am I going to say? Like, what am I going to add that is, edifying at this point with that whole torrent coming out? I don't know. Have you noticed over the course of like the last 5 or 6 years, have you noticed a palpable shift in audience attention during shows as you're playing because of devices?
I've been lucky to have pretty attentive fans in general. People come and they are really attentive and they and show a lot of respect to the music and to the space. There is that thing of looking out and seeing phones instead of faces that is a weird thing, and I like to be able to address it occasionally without becoming preachy.
It's tough.
That's a tough thing, and because I've seen people do that, and sometimes it's just like, man, you addressing this thing is actually more distracting than the thing itself, or you using it as an opportunity to have a moment, is also like can be a weird trope. But I've tried to bring it up occasionally where I'll say like let's just have a moment here. Let's like be together. And I think there's a way to do that without like calling people out. I mean, there's also on the flip side there, I've been considering this thing. You can buy these bags. Actually, Dave Chappelle bought a bunch for like Hotel Cafe. Mm-hmm. And they're these bags that like magnetically seal, and you put your phone in there when you check in. Mm-hmm. You still have your phone on you as an audience member, but you just can't access it during the concert. Okay. But like, if you forget to undo it when you leave or something, you can just cut the bag open and whatever. But
gotcha.
And if you need to go out, to check your phone or something, there's someone at the door there to like pop your thing open, which seems like a lot of extra work, and I know there would be venues that wouldn't be stoked about doing that.
Yeah. Well, but it also gets the person's like social and credit card number, right?
Right.
So then that goes. It's going to work out for everybody.
On your quote unquote mailing list. But I'm really curious about doing something like that at some point to see how people would I mean, I'm sure some people would not be stoked, but maybe, you'd let them know ahead of time when they bought their ticket, like this is the...
Yeah.
And I think there would be people that would be stoked about an opportunity to be at a concert without like that compulsive tendency to check your thing.
I would agree.
Because I even noticed for myself, like, I'll just like leave it at home and then, for a little while I'm like, oh, this is weird. But then, 30 minutes later, you're like, oh, cool. Like I'm paying attention to things. Like I'm thinking more. We just made your podcast all about social media now and cell phones.
Dude, that's actually the Trojan horse I've been trying to get into most of these shows. Yeah, I don't know, man. If it's a deal where I feel like 90% of the audience is listening and it's just the 10% of people who have been brought there by a friend, right? So who don't know the music, I feel like those tend to be the people on their phone. And it's fine. It's not disruptive. But we've both played shows before where there's something about having 100% of people in a room key in.
Yeah.
And everyone feels it. And it's more than the sum of its parts all of a sudden.
And that doesn't even happen when no one's on their phone sometimes. Like that happens like
exactly.
1 out of 50 times.
But if there is that 10% there that's reading BuzzFeed or whatever, it never gives it that opportunity.
Yeah.
Maybe 10% of shows like that could pop like that before, where everyone could be very mindful that, like, wow, we are all having a moment in real time right now, appreciating something. You're in the process of putting together a record right now. If you have a day to write, what does that day look like?
I did a lot of this over the summer, where I just wake up every morning. I'm a morning creative. Some people are late night people. I like waking up and making a cup of coffee and sit down at the piano.
Yeah.
So I just did that every single day, for a while. And I love those times. It's kind of, I think it takes, the scariest part is the beginning, right? Because you got to like get over the fear of failure.
Yeah.
Because that's like showing up and then nothing happening is like you have so much of your identity wrapped up in this creative process that if it fails you on occasion, then it's like you have this existential crisis because this is all I have.
Oh, yeah.
This is all I do. Which is a lie. It's not all I have, but it's the lie you tell yourself. That's like, if I'm not good at this, and if I showed up today and it didn't work, then I'm a failure. So those first few days are always kind of tough because it's like a little rusty gear. You gotta get oiled up. But then once you can get in that flow, man, that's like the best high because you just like are like for me, like living in a creative headspace every day and like surrendering myself to that. Those are the best times. And I think those are pretty hard to like sustain for long periods of time because life has so many distractions. But if you can get in that for a few days or a week or even just a day where it's like you are everywhere you're going, the back of your mind is just turning on making something. And I love that. That's why like I make my cup of coffee, sit down in the morning and like work on whatever for an hour or two, like, and then go away and do something else and let it percolate and then come back to it. And I go to the gym and during the summer I cycle and that helps me. I'm a big proponent of taking walks. Like scientifically, your brain works way better when you take a 20-minute walk than it does if you're just sitting in a chair for an hour. Or
any kind of exercise. I mean...
Masturbate.
That can be a lot of exercise.
It can be.
But yeah, man, I mean, whoever can figure out... Someone's going to make a boatload of money. Whoever can figure out how to put into pill form the way that your body and mind feels after like 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise, right?
Great.
Because it feels really good every time.
I think they call that cocaine.
I think they do call that cocaine. And did they not make a lot of money?
They definitely made a lot of money.
But no, I was saying pill form because we need it to be sanctioned by the government. So I guess it's Adderall.
Right. Yeah, right.
I've used Adderall to write before, and I like it so much that I said to myself, I cannot get a prescription of this.
That's what I've heard about Adderall. I've never done it, but I've heard that's usually the general consensus is that it's
I guarantee
awesome.
you'll like it.
Yeah.
It's like one time I got injured, like I broke a toe or something when I was in high school, and I went to the hospital to have something done, and they gave me a prescription for just like hospital strength, some kind of painkiller, right?
Yeah.
And I took it as I was leaving the hospital, and as I got in my car, I put down the bottle from the pharmacy, and I just started laughing because I felt so good.
Right.
Like there was some sort of opiate in this thing, and it felt so fucking awesome. I threw away the bottle, and I've never done opiates since then because I'm like, guess what? I tried it, and I liked it a lot. It was really good. And I feel the same way about Adderall. I've tried that a couple times, and it's great. I love it, and I like it too much, but I don't have time to add another vice into this trash can of a body at this point, man.
Yeah.
So where does recording come into that part of the writing process? Are you demoing out as you go, or?
Yeah, I usually make like a voice memo of stuff as I go, just so I have it, because it's gotten to the point where there's so many songs that I remember the days when like the Beatles would say this, where they would never demo anything, and if it was good enough, they'd remember it, right. Which is probably true, but I'm not the Beatles, and I'm not like I'm not ready to run that risk. And I write a lot of different stuff for different projects, so I've got kind of different types of melodies going and different things. But this last year actually has been a really recording focused year, not just for my own record, but for other projects, and having some good buddies who work at studios around town, and just having these days where we'll go in and maybe have a skeleton of a thing, but build it from the ground up in the day. Or like we started this project where me and a couple buddies, and we'd bring in like a local guy, like a local songwriter or musician every time. And we've done a few of these where we go in, then the rule is that no one brings anything, like no ideas. Wow. And you just show up and you just start. And you don't overthink it. You just make a riff, you loop stuff, and you write and record a song in a day. And there's something I'd never really written in the studio like that before. No. And it is so much fucking fun. 'Cause especially the space we've been doing it as this really great studio here in Seattle called Studio X, and my buddy Andy is the engineer there, and it's a really nice place where you can kind of have everything just set up, and you can work fast, which is just it's so fun, and you get in that zone, or maybe it takes like a couple hours to get in the zone, but then something locks in, and you're like, all right, cool, that inspires this idea. Because that's how I work a lot of I rarely have like a fully conceived idea when I go to write a song. Maybe I'll have like a line or a melody or something that'll inspire me, and then I'll just see where that takes me. And in the studio, you can actually have those ideas represented sonically as you're moving along, because maybe when you're writing a song on the piano, all you have is just your piano, and you're like, well, maybe some strings will come in here,
we'll fix that later.
Or these drums, maybe drums will come in here or whatever. But if you're you got the drummer, you got the strings, you're all in the room, and you're like, okay, well, what if we wrote the song around these sonic elements, and not just here's where the verse, the bridge, the chorus is going to go. That's been super, super fun. And it's as a songwriter, as a lyric-based songwriter, I feel like my musical growth has been a little bit stunted, as far as an instrumentalist. Yeah. So it's helped me. I think it's really helped me grow in writing musical lines and hooks and things, and being able to think like that, not just thinking
Do you have to come back later to finish the lyrics, or do you just finish them all in one day?
I'll usually do, well, on those days, we'll do everything in a day. So we write lyrics, structure everything. And that's been fun because it's fun to be inspired by a more fully formed piece of music other than just chords on a piano.
Totally.
Because then you can get excited and you write stuff that you... Also, like writing with percussion is a lot different than writing on a guitar or a piano.
I've never had the chance to do that. That sounds great.
I mean, I think even just like getting a little drum machine or making loops of stuff and just writing to that even is like, because it changes your cadence, it changes like how you think about phrasing of lyrics, and it changes, it just changes your vibe.
And then the other edge to that sword is when you write without it, and then you get into the studio, and if you don't have a drummer who's super sensitive to those vocal patterns, it can throw things off big time.
Yeah. Or it morphs and changes and you go with it. I mean, it can go many ways.
Yeah. I feel like once it starts morphing and changing from there, once the vocal line starts taking a little wander, I mean, it can go that way, but that's where all of our ears are going to in a song, and I feel like, and I'm just expressing this because I've had some regrets in the past about listening to albums that I made later and saying, wow, I really let the nugget of the song get away here because I got distracted by something else.
Yeah, that is like the constant struggle, like to remember what is the gold in your thing. Like when you're making a song or recording a song, especially, is to like keep that perspective of remembering like what is the center of this thing, and to not be we have so many resources and opportunities to add other stuff on, which can be great. And like my new record has a shit ton of tracks on it and layers and stuff, and but I think we did a pretty good job of like keeping the focus still on the song.
When you're producing other people's albums, is that one of your main jobs as a producer? Is just kind of getting an eagle-eye view of their work for them to remind them of what it is? Yeah.
I mean, Quincy Jones said producing, the like two most important things of producing are like love and trust. So, making sure that someone knows that you really care about what they're doing and you care about them as a person.
Yeah.
And then, create a safe environment so that they trust you. And not overstepping and like not getting in the way. And I'm really new to the producing thing, so I'd like to do more of it in the future. But yeah, being able to have a little perspective is, I think, an important thing, because we all get lost in our own songs and lost in our own MO and our perspective, which isn't always the best thing.
It isn't, but if you have that love and trust with another person, it can be really great for one person to be lost, as long as you have someone else standing over top saying, "Oh no, 2 inches hot, cold,
right.
Warm." That can be a nice place. I've gotten close with a couple of projects that I've worked on with some people, but personally, have you ever had an experience with someone, whether it was a producer or someone else in a studio environment, where you felt that level of trust to be guided yourself?
It's hard because, like I said, I'm pretty controlling of my thing,
right?
Which I think is good. I'm not really. I know I will never be one to fully hand over the reins to anybody else.
Fuck no.
And I don't. I think it's like sometimes I think that would be awesome to be like, all right, here's this super simple song I wrote. I trust you to make all the music, do the thing.
I'm on vacation in Spain.
Right,
and,
I'm drinking a Mai Tai here.
Yeah.
I'm listening to the demos on my phone. And maybe, who knows, maybe someday I'll have the opportunity to do something like that. But I've felt like I've had really great collaborative partnerships with people. Like my friend Nate, who I've been working on this record with, he's really been producing the record, and he's kept me on track, and we've butted heads on some things, and it's been a really long process. We've been working on this for a long time. But I trust that he is just as invested in making this the best thing he possibly can as I am.
Yeah.
And that's a really big deal.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Where do you What would you like to be doing the most of in 10 years? Is that going to be touring? Is that going to be making other people's records? Just making records that you send out into the world and kind of hang here in Seattle? What do you think you'd like to do?
It's weird thinking about 10 years from now.
Or
even, yeah. But no, I think, like, this last year was the first year that I was content to be home.
And not tour.
Yeah. Like, 27. And this is the first time I feel like I've liked being home. So that kind of changes everything. Like, I'm starting to book up this year, and it's like with mixed feelings, because it used to be that if I was home for 3 months, I would be losing my mind.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I've got like a great place. I've got a kind of a good routine. I think part of it, I'm just more okay with myself. I'm not running from stuff as much.
Yeah, man.
So I can be at home and I can be by myself and I can like hang out, work on music. I can be with my friends, play video games, go biking, do my life. But at some point you got to pay the bills. So I got to
I know all about that.
Go out and hit the road and stuff. But in 10 years I'd love to. I mean, I sincerely love playing shows, and like I look forward to touring this new record with the band and playing for people, and so I'd love to have a mix of everything. I like having diversity in my creative life, so I'd love to continue to have different projects with different people and make records and just have a kind of simple but sustainable life where I can be creative every single day and maintain solid relationships with the people I care about. It's not a lot. It's nothing. It's nothing crazy. I'd like to be able to pay my band a living wage and make a little money touring. And
well, I think if you're getting people's socials and credit card numbers from those little bags,
I think so. I think the little bag social scheme is going to be key for that. So be looking for that in 2017.
Well, dude, thanks for sitting down with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Right
on.
That's our show for this month. Thank you for listening. Noah's latest project is called Young in the City, available everywhere digital music is sold or streamed. I highly recommend it. Today's episode was engineered and mixed by Matt Schuessler. Research and editorial direction provided by the intrepid and thorough Paul Barbagallo. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive pair of jeans is not a song. A compelling Instagram account is not a song. And most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself. And for you, just keep your eye on the song.